no kina semdol ka ke mo fa seda.
And we're live.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a show about EVE Online, a spaceship game. If you're watching us live on Twitch TV, we have a podcast version on talkinginstations.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a YouTube hub with videos on demand at youtube.com/talkinginstations, all one word. Today we have episode 221. I'm your host, Carneros from The Bastion, and I'm joined by three hosts and a guest today. First, since we're up on screen, we'll go around the screen and introduce you to, if you're watching, to the people who are up on camera here. Hello, Elise Randolph from Pandemic Legion.
Hello. Happy to be here. I had to take the last week off, but I'm very happy to be back. I've had a lot of fun with this expansion. I can't wait to talk about the story today. I'm so excited.
Excellent. And then diagonal from me, you see Matterall, the founder and father of our show here. Say hi, Matterall.
I'm a papa. Hello. Good to be on.
And then below me, I have McLeod from the Initiative. Hello, McLeod.
Hey, guys.
Very nice. And then you can't see him on screen, but we have a special guest today, Sharoon Sholdar from Razor Alliance, but he goes by Sully, which is a whole lot easier. Ladies and gentlemen, Sully.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show here. We're going to talk about Adventures of Forsaken Fortress. Here, I actually named the show Forsaken Fortress Massacre, but I'm not sure if Matterall's going to change that later.
Yeah, probably.
But there's some stories to tell you about what happened this week in the wake of the launch of this expansion or this content update. So definitely want to jump into that. You may have seen articles this week in PC Gamer or Massively OP. Both of them wrote stories about it. I believe they both interviewed you. Is that right, Sully?
PC Gamer, I know, has interviewed me.
Okay. And then, and I think they may have even spoken to Elise. Is that right? You're looking guilty there, Elise.
Yeah, I did just a little bit. He wanted Mesner, who's a great guy when it comes to like writing Eve articles. He kind of can capture like the Eve stories and like filter it down to what normal people can consume. He wanted to just make sure a few things were right, and he also wanted to see he also saw like my tweet of how I got some that wasn't nearly as much as Sully, so I wanted a little bit of insight on that.
Nice. Yeah, he's been on the show before. He's fantastic.
Distant second place, huh, Elise?
Yeah, I'm happy to be distant second.
Yeah, distant. Because you were like killing it at first. And we're like, wow. Everybody else compared to you is like, man, he's just getting all the loot, this Elise guy. And then comes along Sully.
No, it's fantastic. So let's give our listeners a little chance to catch up in case they aren't aware of what Forsaken Fortress is or what happened this week. Matterall, can you just do a light overview for them?
Yeah, so abandoned, wow, is it Forsaken Structures? What's it called? Let me start with the name.
Well, Forsaken Fortress was the
thanks.
name of the update where it added the abandoned state.
Right, thanks. So I get those all twisted up, but it was Forsaken Fortress, and that was introduced on the 26th of May, and that introduced a new state for structures. So for a long time, we've understood that structures had something called asset safety, which meant if a structure, player-made structure, was destroyed, that your assets in it would get essentially teleported to a safe place where you could pick it up. You would have to pay a fee for it, depending on the value of the assets, but you would get them back. So it was assumed that even if you had stuff in a station, that you would have your assets be safe. And that changed. On the 26th, the CCP created a new state for structures. there is functioning, and then there is low powered, and then now this new state is abandoned. And the abandoned state designates that if the structure is considered no longer active, it's no longer drawing fuel. That's the criteria. So even if it has fuel in it, it's not drawing fuel, it's considered abandoned. So it has to be drawing fuel. And if it's abandoned, that means it can be destroyed outright. There's no timers, so people can show up, start shooting, and destroy it. And the gift to them is that what's in it drops as loot. And so the whole of the last few days has been groups going around and destroying abandoned structures all in one go, and then finding the loot. And then there's funny side products of that, people picking up loot and then getting shot themselves, which is kind of funny. So that's basically what Forsaken Fortress is and why it's such a big deal. Now remember, this kicked in on the 26th of May, and it takes 7 days of low power before it slips into abandoned state, which means June 2nd was actually the very first day we started seeing massive kill mails.
Okay, you're up to speed now. So let's start with our guest Sully and ask him what plan did you come up with? Tell us the story of how you got involved in this gameplay.
Okay, so I got involved. I saw the dev blog coming out, and I'd previously done structure clearing in HiSec for possible contents that could come in, such as the fitting drops. So I had experience with war decking and experience with killing the structures, but with them going to abandoned, there's a whole different level of potential loot that you could get. So I figured I have some ISK spare, so I started up some new accounts to train them into Kikimuras with the intention to destroy them. Once the training was started, needed to figure out what to go and attack. So that's coming up to the update. I started to scout probably most of HiSec regions. I think there was only one I didn't do, which was Iridia, because I just didn't fancy trying to get there.
It's a pain in the ass. You don't want to go
Yeah.
there.
So I started just warping around, looking at citadels, their corporations, and just generally using a ship scanner to identify what was fit on the citadels. So if it had a manufacturing plant, then I know, and it was low powered at the time, something in there was at once building. So that's when I started to delve deeper into the corporations themselves, the pilots, and even to search in the contract history of pilots to determine if they are selling, for example, Super and Titan BPCs can only be sold on contract pages. And if you make a public contract, you can see all finished contracts of a player. So I was able to do quite a bit of scouting in that sense to figure out who had what going on.
And so you made a list of targets?
I did. I stopped at 18 because I believed that was a good amount to get in the first 24 hours. Leading up to the days, I still scouted more. And in total, I had 36 targets.
Okay.
It's a fair amount.
So you had to time your war decks so that they, but you don't want to go too early and telegraph your intentions, but you don't want to go too late either and have someone else scoop you. So how did you pick your timing?
So CCP brought out, with the devlog of the patch, they notified that 3 days prior to the abandoned state, you will get a notification saying that your structure, your assets are at risk to every pilot who has assets in that station. So I put a single piece of ammo in every station I scouted.
And you use the cargo drop-off kind of mechanic for that,
Yeah.
right?
The safe cargo deposit that was developed for delivering courier packages, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that little bit of information is very important because if you can't dock in a structure, you can't put anything in the cargo until they changed it so that you could actually just float outside of it and drop something into cargo. Into the holds.
Yeah. At the time they brought that feature out, it was very useful for me because I was doing a lot of courier missions, not courier missions, courier contracts, sorry. So I had also had a possibility of being stung by that, because what people used to do is create a courier contract to a citadel, and then when you accept the contract, deny you docking, so you can
Yeah.
never deliver it, and then the collateral is pretty much their payment.
So when you put
Roger.
in this 1 unit of ammo into these citadels, you get this like living, breathing like intel map of when they're gonna go abandoned, right?
Yeah, I was able to create a timesheet of every structure and what time they became abandoned, so I knew when the war deck would need to be live by. In general, I made the war deck pretty much, I think it was 36 hours ahead of the first structure, and I just war decked them all at once. But I knew how long I had between structures becoming abandoned, so after one was destroyed and the loot was secured, I was immediately moving towards the next one.
And how many characters did you need for this whole endeavor? Because
So
there's a damage cap on these things, right?
yeah, so when I started, I had 5 Kikimuras, and 9 pilots total. I wasn't meeting the damage cap. However, I did upgrade them to Ikitersas, and I was well over the damage cap when they were fully spooled. So I wasn't killing them 100% as efficient, but it was 30-40 minutes of structure, and it would take us again on average between 20 and 30 minutes to secure the loot, get it to a safe station. It was at one point we realized in one system there wasn't a safe station because all of the other citadels were also abandoned, so there was nowhere for us to secure the loot, so we had to move it to another system.
I'm sure that had to be stressful as heck.
Right.
Because after these citadels explode, for those that haven't like partaken in this delay, so the citadel dies and it drops a wreck of whatever was fitted to it, and then nothing happens. Then the citadel explodes with this big flash, and hangar containers start materializing in like this 200-kilometer sphere around what used to be this structure. And those cans are technically owned by the people who had the stuff in that citadel. So when you go to loot it, anyone can loot it, but when you loot it, you become a suspect.
Yeah, it's not like if you shoot a rat in high sec and you own the loot then and you can go and pick it up. This is you shot it. It wasn't a rat, but you shot it, but you still didn't you still don't own the loot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And if it was a famous person's stuff, you can see it was that famous person's stuff. It's very interesting.
Stealing is still a crime.
I do
In
believe
hindsight.
I have seen a hangar container belonging to CCP Hilmar.
Ooh.
Oh,
There was one titanium.
that's pretty.
Oh.
Yeah,
Someone
that's
did
one
that
of
for
the
you.
one of
That's
the
that.
fun things, right? You can, if you own the
So,
citadel, you can deliver it to any single person.
yeah, yeah.
So
When,
overall, I had 9 characters total. In there was also some pilots that needed to fly various ships. One of the first structures we destroyed, we had a war deck going, but also another group, Black Flag, had another war deck on the structure. So there's 2 entities just shooting at each other, shooting at this one station. Both are then going to have to loot loot containers, which make them suspect. So rather than, so I struck up a convo with them, and rather than be trying to shoot at each other and just generally get in each other's way, we decided to work together and just literally split everything 50-50, because otherwise all that would happen is we'd just be brawling against each other for loot. And that structure dropped a freighter and about 1.5 billion in modules and various bits of loot, which
Yeah, not
was
bad.
it was quite surreal because it was the first structure and we just came against another group and just worked together. But after that one, we both had different war decks. So they went off to shoot their structures, and we went off to shoot ours. Shortly after that, I had a couple of friends come on who were there to more search these cans, because the next Athanor I destroyed had over 60 cans. And it completely
that's
ranges
awkward.
from it ranges from most of them being filled with one trip, one ammo from various different groups, or a large amount of shuttles and corvettes and things like that. So finding the right can becomes a needle in a haystack. And it was on the next Athanor where we had our first member of the public who came along just to have a go at stealing some of the loot, and he got away with about 3 billion in BPOs,
Oof.
which was a little bit discouraging. We managed to pull out an Orca and a Hulk, so we still managed to pull out 1 billion, but it was more frustration that we had lost stuff. So at that point, I invited some more friends from my corporation to come along, and basically the agreement was we split any drops we got, and they could help search the ever expanding amount of containers.
How did
That's
you
the
find out
thing.
about? Oh, sorry, go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's the thing. Like, when these things pop, like you can be a scavenger. You don't have to war deck anything. You can just be a scavenger and just go to these cans, cherry pick, and then run away. Like I've seen a lot of that, and it's always really stressful when you find a citadel, or an Athanor or something that's on a moon. It's very easy to see, or something by a gate or on Gertha Station, because as soon as it pops, you're on a timer to see like where's the good loot before someone grabs it.
It's kind of like that old mechanic with ghost sites where the loot would just starburst and you'd have to run around and try to catch as much as you could.
But
Yes,
how
yes,
did you know what the other guy ran off with?
Because I convored him to find out what he got.
See, that was
'Cause I was
that's
like,
what I was going to ask actually as well.
yeah, I was a bit miffed that he got away, but we knew there was something in that can because there was other Blueprint originals and a couple of Blueprint copies. So I convored him and just said, "We got this. What do you get?" And he linked some industrial BPOs.
And not bad.
Yeah. So after that, we had a total of 7 pilots, including myself, come along, and we started to just go down the list of structures. One of the next ones we attacked dropped a jump freighter and about 10 billion in abyssal loot, as
Ooh.
well as 3 abyssal ships, 2 Gilas and an Ishtar. So we were very fortunate. That was about a 22 billion drop before fittings. Coincidentally, we have found out since then, we have found the pilot that owned that structure because he's a mutual friend. So we know because he was convoyed with one of the other players that was there and said, "Oh, was the Rhea called Scout?" He didn't know at the time. He said, "I also had 2 Ishtars and a Gilu in the structure." And I was just there thinking, the Rhea was called Scout. So
Was
we
he
have
like,
found.
can I have my stuff
Yeah.
back, please?
He wasn't actually. He kind of had fallen out of the game before this update. He had been out of the game for around about 5 to 6 months. He reckons. So he wasn't intending to come back. He's not lost everything in this structure, but he's lost a good portion of wealth. But he hasn't lost all of his assets.
Did you get any kind of impression from him as to whether he was angry about the fact that he didn't know that it was happening, or like
He
Did he know?
was. He
Did he
knew.
know asset safety was going away for this structure and he was going to lose his
I
stuff?
don't believe he did. I didn't ask him directly, but he didn't seem annoyed. He seemed very just, okay, well, that's that then. It's very acceptance I got, which is, I'm hoping what most of the pilots who come back to the game to this are like. It all depends on their percentage of wealth they have lost.
I mean, there might be one that might not be feeling like that you found.
Yeah, you do look a bit guilty, Elise, as well.
I don't know. So I've had some similar interactions. Like obviously I haven't, and we'll get to your big score in a minute. But some of the ones that I hit, like my system was, oh, I like this corp name, click, and that's how I declared war on different abandoned structures. Or oh, this system, I have memories of this system. I have stuff there. Let me go see if there's any things there. Oh, there are, war deck. So mine is much more haphazard. So sometimes I get cans of nothing. Sometimes, like yesterday, I accidentally hit a code base, I guess, and I got 200 something Tech One destroyers, like all suicide gang fit.
Code is an alliance because you said code base and it sounded like you were talking about programming.
Oh yeah, no, I got like a little staging center for code.
A stockpile of suicide ganking ships.
So did you get like 10,000 destroyers or something?
Yeah, it was like something like 250, and then I stopped looting. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
You guys
And
are
then
like
I guess
tearing it out.
the game broke and it wouldn't let me repackage them all at once. I have to repackage one by one. So just leaving them there. But I found that some of the people that I would war deck, just by random chance, one guy in particular, he came back to the game because he wanted to vote for CSM, and he logged in to collect his like login rewards or something. And then he saw this war deck. He was like, "Oh, what's this about?" He asked his friends, and they were like, "Hey, if you have citadels, they're in abandoned state now. All the stuff drops." And while I was shooting one of his structures, he onlined all the rest of them. So I only got one, but I ended up striking up a conversation with him. And he was like, "Yeah, if you got all of these, there's no way I would have returned to the game. Like, this is all of my stuff." And there's more to this story later, but I think I think everyone's itching to hear like the big heist that Sully grabbed.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
Happening Statil system, right?
it did, yes. I checked. So this particular structure, when I scouted this corporation, Future Tech, I was interested to see their killboard history shows a lot of freighter ganks, and each time the freighter was between 5, 10 billion, and 20 billion, and they were happening every couple of months, which normally indicates there's some wealth behind the player, because not every player can lose a 20 billion roughly freighter every couple of months. So when I scouted this structure, I noticed it had the Raito was fit with advanced component rigs and another rig which I forget the name of it, but designed for building ships, T2 ships. So I had predicted it was possibly an invention facility. Either he was buying BPCs or just generally inventing them in another place and building T2 hulls that way, which coincided with the materials that he was losing in the freighter. So we showed up to the Raitaru, and from that we destroyed it. It was a private owned structure. So after the destruction, we had our pilots all on TeamSpeak, and we rapidly searched the containers. There was about 7 or 8 of them total. Obviously, one of them being my own. And it was one of our newer pilots in the group who called out a can that he said contained 200 million. And so I walked over to him because at that stage that was the rarest can there. And I opened it and it was 220 billion. Edge point. Yeah, he
Whoa.
called out that there's some BPOs, so he has scooped the BPOs and got them to station, whilst I was beginning to log on a freighter pilot, which we had secured from a citadel a couple of jumps away, to come and move some of this loot, because it was 13 million M3. So
Heavy, huh?
we had a lot of our pilots in small, fast locking ships as well to bounce around to the cans, and we had a couple in maulers and ruptures, just to try and kill anyone that is ninja looting. The small ships all had a point fitted, so if someone did steal something, go suspect, then they will be pointed, and not so much allow them to get away with something, but deny them the chance of getting away with the loot. And then it was a case of just moving from the station to the container. Now, I originally was trying to figure out a way of having it so the freighter pilot didn't go suspect. After a short while, I decided it would take too long. So I then had a suspect freighter warping from the place where the Raito died and the station. At any point, someone could have pointed me on the station and made it annoying, but there was no one really in system to notice. We didn't have anyone trying to steal any loot or anything like that. It was a very lucky situation to have all of this drop in a container and no one else was there apart from our group. And it was after we secured all of the loot in the station that I got traded the can of BPOs, of which when I opened it, I was very surprised to see the 23 T2 BPOs. But there was also 3 Hulk BPCs and 3 Ishtar BPCs.
So, but you weren't the first to open it, right? Wasn't somebody else?
No.
Okay.
It was one of my friends, yeah, he looked inside and just saw them as BPOs. But he himself has only recently come back from a long break from the game, 2 to 3 years break. So he didn't have his corporation had long gone. So that's how we met us, was through the recruitment on the forums. So we was only talking to him a couple of days before this, and we literally said, "Oh, we're doing stuff in HiSec, not in 0-0 at the moment. Do you fancy coming along?" And it was pretty much a extended interview kind of process of killing these structures at the same time.
That's like the best
Look at those
conversation he ever had.
Look at those beautiful BPOs on the screen there.
Still,
For the listeners at home, a Scimitar BPO, Lachesis, Prowler, Hound, Eris Vagabond. Wow, those are gorgeous.
I imagine
Really,
the control and the energized adaptive nanomembrane BPO sold for quite a bit if you even sold them, Sully.
So those two actually didn't sell for that much. The Energized Adaptive was very difficult to get a price point on. I had conversations with a couple of resellers of T2 BPOs, as well as I have some previous experience many years ago. One of my old corporations, when I was in gentleman's agreement, we had access to some T2 BPOs. So I had rough ideas of values, and I do occasionally watch the forums for decent sales and stuff. So I am keeping an eye on things, so I knew rough values. But the damage control, Enam, and the Scimitar BPOs, there was very little history on the forums of them being sold.
Let me back you up just for a second, because I want to get this point really clear with the audience. You guys, he picks up this guy that you know only for a few days, who's come back from the game, picks up the can, opens it, looks through it, doesn't understand what he's looking at, and tells you what?
He called out that we just have some BPOs, and when I was docking in the station with the last load from the freighter, he said it was a Scimitar. So I assumed he meant it was a BPC. I assumed he couldn't be accurate for us having BPO, because whilst we was moving the loot, moving the freighter back and forth, I mentioned that there was very few BPCs present, and even fewer BPOs. And that's when he called out that he had a can with it.
I imagine, because there's very few people who've actually seen T2 BPOs as such, and I imagine the initial kind of assumption is, oh, they're BPCs.
Yeah, it's quite easy to mistake a BPO from a BPC. There is very little difference between them, aside from a lighter shade of blue.
Yeah, for those that haven't done any industry or invention stuff, a BPO is a dark blue, and the BPC is a light blue as the background. So it's especially when you see a Tech 2 BPO, which has a little 2 like the ship does in the top left, it's easy to say, oh, this is clearly from invention, right? It's going to be a light blue BPC. And when you look at the value in the bottom right of a can or your inventory, since these are so rarely traded and they don't exist on the market, there is zero value attributed to them. So if you click on it, it'll just say value 0. So when you look at the bottom right of a can, unlike a Tech 1 BPO, which will give you the value of it is on the NPC market, the Tech 2 variant will just say 0. So it's easy to open it up and say, oh, there's a whole bunch of Tech 1 BPOs in here, 200 billion, and the Tech 2 BPOs, they're probably just BPCs.
Yeah, it's very easy to mistake that.
And not to take anything away from him. Maybe he knew what he was looking at. He's like, look, I'm an honest guy. These guys have been good to me. I'm going to turn over this 4 trillion in blueprints. But
The most honest Eve player ever, by the way.
Ever. Instead of just taking off with it and saying, yeah, I didn't find anything, it's a bunch of mothballs. But he did turn it over to you. You knew what you were looking at, and that was a pretty big payday.
It was, yeah. I have asked him since if he knew the value now that he did then, would he have traded it over? I said, nothing's going to be a consequence. I just was wondering. And he doesn't even know. He's been asking himself the same question. He did say that he's only just come back from a long break. He doesn't know how the game has progressed since then. He's not really kept up to the updates. So he doesn't know a lot of what has changed. So I think I hope to think that he would have, because he just needed somewhere to help him catch up to where modern events are.
So here's the interesting thing. You're talking about, and if we're being, I guess, on the safe side, it's 4 trillion or so, you estimate?
With what has been sold, selling, and what has been other stuff done with, let's put it that way, I could have sold everything for 4.1 trillion.
All right, so if you think of the largest fight in EVE Online, like the huge, the bloodbath of BTACR, there was something like 13 trillion ISK destroyed. You're talking about one player having in his hangar a third or a quarter, depending on how you want to look at it, of the largest single fight that spanned thousands and thousands of players. It's just crazy in my head to say, oh, those two are comparable.
For those that don't know,
insane.
Eve, that's about $60,000 US.
It's even,
sorry.
as I say, it's even more baffling when you think it's a quarter of the largest fight in EVE, over 23 items.
Yeah.
And on the screen I'm just showing you right now is the difference, as you can see, the difference between a BPC and a BPO. The Cruiser is the BPO, the Vehement is the BPC. So you can see the kind of color difference.
Know how did you control your bowels? Like, how did you not? How did you just not go crazy? Like, did you have an adrenaline rush?
I did, yes. I immediately went and spoke to the person that put the Reddit post up earlier, Breeze, who was not very, well, he was very salty over the whole incident, because up until that point we'd been letting him know what we had got, and he didn't like that. But when we told him this, he just flat out just refused to believe it. And it was very shocking. Pretty much everyone in the channel with us could not believe the drop. It is the kind of thing that you just don't expect to find ever.
Did you immediately go and put it into a Rotaru?
I did not. It was immediately put into the Statil NPC station, and the reason as to why other people did, there was a Facebook post on the Facebook group as well as the Reddit post, was because I did not want the character that had them to be associated in any way. So when they were later moved, I didn't have to worry about someone sitting outside the station with half a dozen tornadoes waiting for me to warp off.
That's understandable.
So you didn't put him in an unfueled Rotaru?
No.
For safety.
Back into the ecosystem.
I mean, I love a bit of adrenaline as the next man, but I think that'll be a bit too much.
All right, I just gotta know though, when you finally arrived at the NPC station, you have this huge payday, the biggest payday EVE Online has ever seen. It's bigger than any heist. It's bigger than any I don't know, any loot dropped anywhere, anytime. Like, what's that feel like to finally secure it in a place you know is permanent?
It's very surreal because I'm by no means poor on ISK. I had probably a wealth of around 200 billion before this drop. I have a Titan pilot. So for me, it was a very surreal moment on that. It has greatly increased my wealth. But for other people in the group with us, they didn't have as much as I did at the start. And it's just been a complete shell shock for a lot of them. Just quite literally because no one expected to gain from a little high-sec adventure spanning over a few days enough ISK to set them up for the next 5 to 10 years.
And then even then some. It kind of reminds me, and I'm probably gonna date myself here, but it reminds me of the Beverly Hillbillies. If you guys have ever seen that series, I think they also made it into a movie in like the '90s. But that's how I imagine you and your crew. Your guys are just chilling, sitting on a farm somewhere, and then you strike oil, and then you just can live this extravagant life for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it has resulted in quite a few fun expenditures. Mine was unfortunately rather dull in that I have kept some of the BPOs and they are not in any way at risk, which is quite nice. They're going to sit lovely and safe probably for the next decade whilst I have them. But there have been purchases of Titans and Supers. And
I mean, Sully, until you're away from the game and CCP makes NPC stations destructible.
yeah, if that ever comes out, I may just have to put them on a character, cloak him in a system, and just log him off. It'll be the only way they can't be touched.
What's the most extravagant thing you purchased with your new wealth? You know how the Brits would use the expression a flash car?
So
Did you buy anything like that?
for me, not so
Did you get a
much.
Moloch or something?
So we had joked before that I said to a couple of people whilst planning this out, oh, if I get 500 billion, I'll just buy myself a Moloch. And I have unfortunately gone back on that because I don't think I'd ever be allowed to fly it in a fleet. And it's a lot of this to tie up in one ship. And with NPC Satios especially, they're very I think they're very in flux at the moment because I don't believe it was the intention of CCP to bring in a $500 billion Titan. I believe it was supposed to be a bit more cheaper to actually acquire, so it would be an odd investment. But I'd have to say the flashiest thing that has been purchased so far within the span of 5 minutes was an Airbus and a Nix from the same pilot.
Not bad.
No gold monocles?
Not yet.
I love how the PC Gamer article they mentioned about the fact that you had this Titanic drop that you still carried on going through the rest of the
Yes. So this was on either number 13 or 14 on my list. I'm not entirely sure. But we did continue on, even whilst doing the interview of PC Gamer. I was still killing structures at that time.
Were you like searching for that high? Were you like, lightning can strike twice? I can just get another set of Tech 2 BPOs. Except instead of Minotaur, it'll be like Kaldari or something.
I was thinking, I wonder what the chances are of us beating that drop.
Well, there's no reason to think there aren't any more expensive, trophies out there waiting.
I mean, there has to be, right?
Yeah, so looking over from the scout on this, I believe he's had these BPOs in his possession since before 2011. So there could quite easily be other hordes of them elsewhere. but I think it would be difficult to find because whereas previously with citadels, people have been clearing them out. Wrecking Machine, for example, do clear out a lot of citadels. It would have to be in a citadel that hasn't been used and hasn't been killed by war deck. And with the current hype that is killing high-sec Retiros and citadels in general, that is an ever-dwindling number.
So there is a bit of, I don't want to call it controversy, but there's a sort of a mixed feeling on this whole mechanic. And I found myself like, so very rarely am I in like the, I don't want to call it the Care Bear side of things, but uh, generally I'm not one to be like crying about these types of mechanics. And I guess I'm not really crying. But so the controversy is like CCP told players that these citadels would be safe, and that asset safety was a feature, and that they were better over, like they're an improvement over player-owned stations, the POSs. For those that don't know, if you owned a POS and you wanted to research a BPO, you could do that without moving your BPO. Like you could manufacture off of it and research off of it while the BPO is in a station, and then you research into the POS. And so your stuff never gets, there's like never a chance of it losing. And so CCP said, hey, these things, they're the next best thing. We're going to depreciate POSs. These are the future, and they're safe. And at the time, people were like, oh man, it sucks that these asset safety exists. And I absolutely was in that boat. I was like, I don't like the idea of asset safety in these structures, but I understand why you made that decision, because otherwise no one would ever like go into these things. And then in the course of, so that's 3 years of messaging. This is the new safe structure, blah blah blah. And then EVE Online sees this proliferation of these citadels. They could be anchored everywhere. They've got dumb names sometimes. They litter your overview, and they get very annoying. And there's just so many of them. And so CCP decides, hey, it'd be dope is if we got rid of these somehow. And it was a great idea to make sure, like, add that new state to have it go abandoned so you can destroy them in one timer. And I do believe that the intention was to make this announcement at FanFest and have it as like a marquee announcement. So anyone that had their fingers dipped into EVE Online in any capacity would be made aware that, like, oh, abandoned structures now drop all the loot. But that didn't happen because of the global pandemic. So there was no FanFest. So like this release was a little bit more muted, I would say. And then, so in the course of a month, you have 3 years of history reversed, and all of this stuff, which was once safe, is now no longer safe. And so these people lose all of their things. And I know the narrative is, oh, these guys have been stopped playing for years, so who cares? They're never going to come back anyway. But in my like little like search of this, that's not the case at all. A lot of these people, from the ones I'm killing, we're not talking about the huge 4 trillion ISK ones, right? We're talking about the small 5 to 10 billion ISK ones. These guys were playing in March. Some of these people, they just took a break from the game. So EVE Online is very much a game where you can go, but you never leave, if that makes sense. So you can take a break, and I think everyone
Hotel
playing this
California.
game,
At least,
was
yeah,
thinking
Hotel
that.
California. But there is something that we should get the audience to understand. This is not the old players. They're not affected by this. Can you explain like what that window is of people that are affected by this in a bad way?
so the people affected by this are players that played in the last 4 years or so. Because CCP did make one little stipulation where if you were a faction Fortizar, which is something that like used to be a player owns or a player made station, those are transferred into faction Fortizars. Those never enter an abandoned state, for various reasons, probably because there's way too much stuff in there. And those things would have loot from players that have long since played. But you're talking about a lot of these ones are players that have played in the last 3 or 4 years. And the people I've been talking to, like a few random ones that I talked to, like the gentleman that like wanted to come on to vote for CSM. He told me his story, and it just made me feel super glad that I didn't kill his stuff, right? So his story is CCP made moon mining and high sec a thing where it wasn't before, and it became super in vogue. So everyone started doing it. This guy and his 4 real life friends, they quit their corporations and formed their own little high sec group, and they put down Athenors on moons in this one little pocket. They put down 4 Athenors, they'd mine them. That's how they made their ISK. They kind of, you might view it as lame if you're a PvPer, or if you play nullsec, you might say, oh, that's lame. That was their like nightly routine or their weekly routine. Then that playstyle got nerfed because there are too many resources. No one's going to say like that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing that it got nerfed. And these guys were like, well, our playstyle is completely different now. I don't know what I want to do. So they all took a break. And in so doing, they left all of their stuff in these Athenors because for one reason or another, they either didn't feel like moving it, they knew it was going to be safe, or in 1 or 2 cases, there were no other stations in the system. So these poor guys, they just left for a little while, and they didn't think about anything. Like they were like, okay, we'll just wait, see how this resource redistribution plays out, and then they come back. If this one guy didn't come back to turn them all of their stuff would be gone. And like you're saying, oh, who cares? But these guys, they're small voices that you don't hear, right? Like that's the thing. It's not like Blackout where you have a third of New Eden screaming. These voices, you won't ever hear them scream, right? They'll just silently pick up, and then they'll be gone one day. And when you have so many of these industrialists leaving, or these small groups leaving, like the social structures in Eve start to break down too. Because if these guys, like if their little social group leaves by only 1 or 2 of them, then the other 2, they don't have any social structure left, so they probably just quit anyways. So anyway, that's my rant about this thing. Like I really like the idea of killing these abandoned structures. I don't think there needed to be incentive on it. And I do think it probably needed to be communicated a little bit better, or like you could have just done an asset safety for all the stuff that's in there.
Yeah.
The fact that
there was different ways to tackle this. At least I want to pick up on your point. But first, I want to make it really clear that if you haven't played since 2014, this doesn't affect you.
exactly.
I think the first day Citadels arrived, if you have not played since that moment, this doesn't affect you at all. So it was only. Go ahead.
I was going to say, someone in chat asked, well, they said, well, he came back, so who cares? I've hit 40 of these Citadels, and I've netted close to 1 trillion ISK, right? I got really lucky on one, but the others are just like 10 billion here, 15 billion there. They're just a small group's life that's just gone now. And you can tell, like, some of them I don't feel guilty about, right? If you shoot a structure and it's like doctrine ships, like who gives a shit, right? Like some guy can just like, replace that.
500 catalysts.
Yeah, like 300 catalysts. Who cares? That's meaningless. But like the one that gets me the most, right, is when you get a ship like a rattlesnake that has like all Dreadgris's fittings on it, and he's got like some like nerdy name to it too. And so like he's put everything he can. This is his trophy. This is everything that this one person played Eve for. And it's now gone in my possession. I'm ripping all the pieces off, quick selling it on Jita, like just defiling everything he's worked for. And I hear people say, well, that's Eve. Eve is a place where death happens and it's a dark, cold environment. And I agree. And that's why I've been playing Eve for 16 years. When you undock, no matter where you undock, you're risking whatever you're in. That is a known fact of EVE Online, and I accept that, and I love it. I've done suicide ganking. I've been suicide ganked. I've rolled with the punches and all that. But these guys were told it's safe. They're like, this is safe. They were pushed into these things, and then like the guy that like I almost killed, he didn't get an email. I know CCB Convict mentioned that they sent out something like 150,000 emails to inactive accounts. This guy's account wasn't inactive. He was still Omega. He was trading stuff. he had like a 3-month long queue. He just randomly logged in to vote for the CSM, and he had no idea about these changes because, like, I don't know, he doesn't read every single dev blog of a game he's not actually actively playing.
Who did he vote for? I'm just kidding.
So he logged in Omega's account in order to vote, and then CCP went with the whole email spam to let everybody know. Anybody who hadn't been playing the game for like 6 months, a year, or whatever, logged in literally in Omega literally just to vote. Didn't get these either.
No, he was already Omega. He did not convert
Oh,
himself
okay,
to
okay.
Omega in order to vote. So no.
Yeah, he had done for the
Well,
last FanFest, he had done like a year subscription or something. So
I mean, I've done that before, so like I can understand that. Like I've kind of been away from the game for like a year and a bit before, and not realized that I'd had a reoccurring going on constantly kind of thing. So it happens. Hopefully this is a kind of a learning experience as well for CCP as well, in terms of getting a good kind of understanding how people kind of play, and understanding how people kind of structure their accounts, even if they're not playing the game kind of thing.
This is something you've talked about, Carneros, many times. We've had discussions about, you have a reservoir of players that might return. Why would you want to hurt that in any way? What do you think about this move?
Well, they don't care because CCB doesn't care because they've got lots of new players coming in that they can convert over. EverQuest doesn't get that many new players coming in. They do. They get like 100 a day. You'd be surprised. And almost none of them stick. The people who, when they have when you see players coming into the game and they look like they're new, they're almost certainly an old EverQuest player playing again. But EVE Online has updated their appearance over the years, has a great game design that has stayed more relevant, and it gets new players, so they can replace the new players. Is they can replace the old players in their minds.
So it's an old game in a new body, huh?
But let's give a little more context for a moment. Sure. The game's economy is out of balance, and CCP has put the game on a diet, to use an analogy for a moment. We're going to get in shape. We're going to get healthier so that the game will last many, many more decades. That's the concept in their minds. So we've gone into a temporary period of resource famine. There's a huge, massive reduction in the amount of resources coming into the game now. You're looking at monthly economic reports in Delve that are a tenth of what they were a year ago. And that, famine is the best word to describe the resources situation now in Nullsec. And they've been told this is a temporary thing till we get the economy under control. And then once it's where we want, we can start adding more resources back into the game. So this was a great time for an industrialist to go take a break. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Because we're going to surprise you with this 4 or 6 week warning, very short warning period, that you're going to lose everything you own that you worked on for years. That was in an Upwell structure if you don't, come back and do something about it. That's a bad timing situation. Now, the people who are working on the structures gameplay aren't on the same team with the people who are working on rebalancing the economy. They didn't compare these things. These are just things happening at the same time. Stuff happens like that in the real world too. You'll have, a bad moment for a hurricane to make landfall and things like that. This happens. Even is like real life sometimes. Now I want to layer on in intel gathering for this a little bit. They're, in my opinion, two fairly questionable edge case systems for collecting intel that you might use on this that are being added to the picture. One is they've repurposed the ability to drop cargo deposits on the outside of a structure, so you can't screw a person doing a courier contract. They can always deliver their package, but they've combined that ability with the ESI system and easy software to allow you to automate the tracking of structures, either for unanchoring, so you can go scoop them and steal them, or in this case, watching them go into abandoned state. So this is not arguably what CCP had in mind. It's a reuse of a mechanic, fairly cheap for perfect intel that has no counterplay to it. And let's say, okay, maybe that's okay. I would say CCP needs to look at that design again and see if they can't do a better job with it. But it's not an exploit. It's not been declared an exploit. And then there's a second thing where they can go to Singularity test server and they can blow up a structure to see what it will drop. In fact, they managed to do that with my main Keepstar on my favorite main Keepstar that I base myself out of. I went the other day to go test something, and Keepstar was gone, and all my ships were gone except the one I'm sitting in. I'm like, oh shit! All right, who did this? You're not really supposed to be doing stuff like that on Singularity. You're not supposed to do things that impact the ability of other players to test things on the server too. At least that's my understanding of the philosophy. I may be somewhat outdated. But there's a couple of shady things being done on the fringes of proper intel collection that have contributed in some ways to this Forsaken Fortress bonanza. Any comments on that?
So I know Oh, okay, go.
I was just going to say, like, the whole placing an item in the cargo deposit in order to actually figure out various is, in my estimation, like that is the sandbox at work, right? And EVA's always been praised as a sandbox game, so kind of negating that would be, in my consideration, to be sort of bad in a generalized sort of sense. Maybe that whole mechanic should be slightly weakened, so it's not so immediate, so it's not so obvious or apparent or accurate. The whole kind of blowing structures up on City to figure out what's inside them, I think is kind of over the line, at least in my opinion.
As far as I'm aware, any act of aggression on CC outside of the main testing system is a bannable offense of CC.
It's one of those things that's a rule, but I've never once in 15 years seen it enforced.
I have once got it enforced when I had 7 Titans drop on me testing Dreadnought mechanics. I had to petition it. I got in touch with CCP on the test server. They did replace the Titan that got Doomsdayed, and the characters did get banned for that mirror.
For that mirror.
Yeah,
Yes.
they'll be back in 2 weeks. But I think this is an unintended consequence, Carneros, right? Like this is okay. When people say like, "Hey, these guys are scamming us because we can't dock in a structure where we're contracted to drop off the goods, but we can't dock in there, and so therefore we forfeit the fees and we lose money, and that's not fair." And you see that there's pressure brought to bear on that, and CCP thinks, "Well, let's fix this. Let's say you don't have to dock in order to drop something in that station." That's an easy solution.
Well, perfect. See, there's a situation where they built a mechanic, players came up with emergent behavior, which we love, that made it unfair in some way. CCP came back to their game design and polished it and improved it a bit. Then players came up with an additional emergent behavior. I'm saying that from time to time you have to come back and repolish your work. From
I think Eve players are just too conniving sometimes, right? So when I first started shooting these structures, I get cans from the same like two dudes. And it would be like one tritanium and one antimatter. I'm like, what is going on? I could not figure out for the life of me what was going on. And then someone told me, oh yeah, there's this group in HiSec. They do this. They put like a trit in everything so they know when they're unanchoring at the exact time. So they just come in and scoop it if the guy's not there, because unanchoring takes 7 days, right? I was like, holy crap, that is genius. I would have never thought about that. So like for that one, that doesn't feel too bad for me. That just feels clever. The CC one is super suspect.
Yeah.
And historically, like CCP have like removed some parts of CC to remove intel gathering from the test server. Hopefully they do that now.
The interesting thing as well with the ESI and the cargo deposit, there is a delay. It's not an instant notification. There is a delay depending on ESI, which can range from I think it's 3 or 4 minutes to I've had one that was 30 minutes previously. So there is a differentiating delay on these. So if it is your structure that is unanchoring and you're worried that someone has a notification that it's unanchored, then you know that it is that you are not likely to have someone on grid with you because of that notification.
What? Say that again, because there's nothing you could do at that point. You can't like stop unanchoring and restart unanchoring because that does not fool the software and this ESI system.
It's so if you know, say for example, you have a Citadel unanchoring at 1 p.m. Eve time on a Wednesday, the notification that someone may get from that Citadel won't be at 1 p.m. It could be at 1:05, 1:10.
Right.
Yeah, but the issue there is the unanchoring process of a Citadel of any kind of size is not like a thing that only takes an hour, right? It takes a while.
It takes 7 days. And
you only get it at the
you do
end.
have one counterplay, and that is you can be sitting there watching up until the moment that it decommissions, and you can cancel it up until the last moment. I've never tried to do it in the last 10 seconds, but presumably one can. So if someone showed their hand early coming into system and you don't have too many structures you're working on at the same time, you could presumably cancel it at the last moment. That's one thing. And then you just restart another 7 days and hope they're busy the next time.
As someone that's picked up a keep star, right, to try to keep it in low sec, no less, right?
Tried.
Where there was, well, there was 2 keep stars, right? The one that I did, I arranged for security from a group that was overwhelming, Goon Swarm, and there were some bandits in the area, but they couldn't, even though we were bugged and we couldn't pick up the keep star for about 4 or 5 minutes, we still ended up with it because we had security. Second keep star goes down in Mela, and that one is someone else is taking that down, and it's completely picked off and stolen. And we're wondering, like, how did they know when that was going to happen? So here's the thing: when you unanchor something, you have a 7-day timer that starts at the moment you say, "I want to unanchor this," and nobody gets that signal, but they can see the status. If they're looking at it, they can see it switch to unanchoring. So at that moment, they could write down 7 days from this exact moment, this thing becomes unanchored, and I could pick it up and steal it. Except that what you're supposed to do in defense of that, in case somebody saw that, is you're supposed to wait about 3 or 4 days and then re-unanchor it, and the 7-day timer starts again. And you do that 3 or 4 or 5 times. And what you do is you watch to make sure you like the conditions. And if something's wrong, you scrub the landing. You say, nope, we got 3 minutes to go, but I don't like the way this looks. I'm restarting the timer for another 7 days. We'll come back in 7 days and try it again. And that's what you're supposed to do. But if somebody can drop a piece of ammunition to figure out in some way, like when that timer is going to end, there's nothing you can do about that to obscure the timer. And that to me seems like, well, an unfair disadvantage to the owner of structures.
So the notification you get from an anchor doesn't get sent until it has unanchored. You have no information up until the point. It is the moment it goes unanchored and shrinks down to that little can. That's when the notifications are sent.
No, that's not true.
Yeah, because the notifications is the asset safety notification of which is moved at the moment of decommission.
That is when you get that notification, but there is additional information available before that that allows you to put your schedule together.
Oh, the abandoned state is 3 days.
That too. And then there's there. I've seen it on the screen. Sorry.
So there is some kind of way that people can know when a structure is going to be unanchored that doesn't belong to them before
it gives them time
goes.
to plan and get a ship there, and they know what kind of structure it is and what size they need to have and where. Yeah.
But if
I thought we were still on about the ESI month. Yeah, that method is questionable.
Yes, sir.
But if you are going to play on anchoring games, though, I would strongly suggest that you keep up to date as to the length of time since you last re-unanchored. Situations have occurred where people have unanchored structures, forgotten about how long it's been since they've re-unanchored, had to scramble in order to go and pick it up. So yeah.
Let's step back from talking about edge case exploits and shadiness, even though it's fun, and let's talk about what Forsaken Fortress has done to Eve in the past week. So there's been a spike in high-sec war decks. There's been a spike in upwell structure deaths. There's also been a spike in players running out there and refueling them. And there's been a spike in players running out and unanchoring them and picking them up too. As far as I could tell, my logistics group has picked up at least 100 structures that they decided they don't need anymore. And it was a pain. We'll go with a pain. We've what else have we seen happening from this?
I mean, if we just look at Athenors alone, right, in terms of Athenors destroyed, there are more deaths of Athenors in the first 7 days of the month than the rest of the year combined, or at least very close to that. It's absolutely nuts to see how many of these things are just exploding.
And in the market, prices of certain things have gone up and down because A, there's more demand for fuel blocks, but B, now there's a bunch of unneeded structures being sold cheaply. And then there's some of the loot being sold. I think people have even been collecting the titanium from these drops and moving it in ships to system because titanium is damn valuable right now. I want to point out. And so there's been repercussions from this content update all rippling through Eve.
Well, the market. Oh, sorry, Lisa. Let me just grab this real quick. The market considerations ripple down, so there's a glut of structures on the market. Therefore, the price goes down for those. But it also means there's no demand for new structures. Too many on the market. So PI is going to go down as well. So you're going to see a ripple effect all the way down to not just structures, but things that are associated with structures, like the rigs you put in a structure, the modules you put in a structure, the materials that make the structures, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's time to go long on Athenors, I guess. But I will say one thing that I have seen, and I'm sure Sully has experienced this a lot too, depending on the structures you go after. I have so many orcas now. I don't know what to do with them. It seemed like every Athenor I killed had an orca in it. So
Why was
just
that?
Orca, because they would use it to boost up and to mine the moons in HiSec.
The Athenors being the mining platforms.
The moon drilling things, yeah, like the moon fracking in HiSec.
So-
And also, it should be noted that we're just talking about HiSec today. HiSec's not the only ones that were affected, right? Like LowSec also, there's been like a massive glut of structures killed, and NullSec too. I know, there are probably people out there who've got bigger ones, but I know people that have gotten multiple trillions from some LowSec and some NullSec structures that have died, right? So you're talking, if you can get like 3 or 4 people together with their heights, probably more like 5 or 6, and throw Sully into the mix there too. That's the entirety of BTAC R through half a dozen people.
There it is.
It's so wonkers to me.
We
My
did it.
experience on this gameplay mechanic is completely different from you guys. I've shot structures too doing this, but I've only shot blue ones, and only ones that, and I haven't bothered to get the loot. And we've only done it defensively because we couldn't get any of those people from those alt corps to come back and take care of their structure, even though we added our messaging ability on top of CCPs and tried to reach out to these people to reach our friends and get them to come back and take care of their structures, and we couldn't. So we had no choice but to either leave it for hostiles to take or blow it up ourselves and take the stuff and give it to the community or put it in storage somewhere. We didn't all take it for ourselves. So yeah, it's gone all the way to nullsec.
I think one thing that theoretically bothers me, right? And I'm just being theoretical here. I don't know if this is a reality. It's hard to say if it is, but there used to be security through obscurity. Like when the first Astor House went down, it was like, good luck, buddy. Everybody knows you dropped it. Everybody knows that's up for grabs, so it's going to get attacked and killed. And so the first 5 or 6 were kind of risky to put down. Then there's thousands of them. And it's kind of like, you're just another Athenor. Nobody cares. Or you're just another Osterhaus. Nobody cares about it. There's so many. Why would they bother killing yours? And it just feels like now at a certain point when all these abandoned structures get removed and there's a cleaning process for anything that's abandoned, it just seems like everything you see in space is going to be something that actually is occupied. Does that make you a better target because there's less of you? And because people know that that's an active use, that people will punish someone who's using that because there is someone attached to it that's taking care of it? I wonder.
I do also wonder about one other thing that I think we kind of touched on, but didn't really land on, right? And it's like, who are the players that are affected by this, at least in HiSec, right? So we talk about players, we're not talking about players that started in 2004, 2006, and then quit and then never came back. We're talking about players that started after 2014, probably 2015, 2016. It's actually not even 2014, right? It's got to be 2016.
I think it was 15, 16, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about players that started 2016, probably 2017. That era of players entered the game where I think many veterans would say it was very safe and maybe a little bit Uneve-like. It felt safe because you had a super capital umbrella if you were in a big block. Just there's a lot of stuff to do, and these Athenors had asset safety. You never had to worry about posses blowing up or anything like that. Do you think that maybe CCP have made the decision that we don't want the players that want safety anymore, or we don't really care if they don't come back? Like, do you think that crossed their brain, or do you think it was more, we meant to put this out for FanFest and be a marquee announcement so everyone and their grandmothers would know about it, but obviously a pandemic you can't plan for, that announcement never got made and it wasn't as big, and just things slipped through the crack? Like, where do you think the pendulum is between those two?
That is a hard one to guess.
Well, I have a thought on this, and that is that who are they inconveniencing, right? I think at first you did something that was stark and reversed culture, right? You had this blackout that took away knowing who was in your space in nullsec, so that you had to do guesswork. You didn't know, and that was a very oppressive thing to players that were here at the time. So you're inconveniencing active players at that time. They rolled that back after they got the information they needed. Some people say it was, including Hilmar, that they rolled it back too late. They should have rolled it back after 45 days, not 66 days of that sort of thing. But then you have like this new wave of adjustments that are inconveniencing active players. And this one seems to inconvenience players that aren't here, the inactive players or the players that are taking a break. And it seems like, well, there's not going to be a whole like rage component to this that there might have been for like Blackout, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the type of people that are affected, they aren't unified, right? They don't have a large voice to complain, and they might just come back, see their stuff's gone, and just not resub, right? So there is like no number. And Brisk mentions in chat something that I've heard a lot of people saying: active players are more important than potential returning players. But I will counter that every active player at some point in their EVE career, if they played for more than 5 years, has been a potential returning player. I know I personally have been. I've taken a short break.
Me too.
Before. I know, like if you look through the who's who of EVE Online, people that run the largest groups, they all have taken breaks. I know Gobbins has taken a break. Matani's taken a break.
But they all have,
taken a break.
They all have structures, right? People are taking care of their structures. So does this really affect those type of players?
I mean, this affects players that are inactive and not part of a large group. They're in like a small social structure rather than a medium or large social structure. Because if I'm in a medium social structure, I just unanchor this thing and it forces asset safety.
The thing is, if you're so far back from, you know, and you've taken a break since before Citadels came into the game, right? Like, you know, coming back to the game, it's not going to affect you in any way, shape, or form. You know, everybody who has played EVE for a good period of time knows that at some point this game almost takes over your life. At some point, when that happens, you know, you go hard and heavy on playing EVE, and at some point, you know, you do at some point burn out if you don't, you know, see that kind of thing coming and adjust. So the you know, people do take breaks from this game, you know, even if you're not like one of those people from way back before Citadels came in. So, you know, it's one of those things that everybody's experienced taking a short break from this, and it's just unfortunate that some people who have had been on a break at this particular point in time, and have gotten a bit of a raw deal.
Okay, there's two other things that two like big names and also former CSMers and current CSMers mentioned. So Villy in chat mentions, it's important to understand it's not all returning players. It's a small subset of players that took a break between 2015 and 2020 and left their assets in a Citadel. That's absolutely true. But the counter is like the people that are benefiting is an even smaller subset of players, right? Like there's 100 people probably doing this like actively in an organized fashion, swagging these things. Like, what's the point of giving me an extra trillion ISK in EVE Online? Like, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to put in. You do have to put your stuff into a Citadel that is owned by somebody who isn't taking care of it. Because if you put if you put your assets into a Citadel that is active and being used by a group that's larger than yourself, then eventually at some point that group is going to be like, well, we're going to take that Citadel down because that's a preventative measure. And in that situation, you're not going to lose your stuff. Your stuff is going to be automatically asset safety. So,
yeah. And another point that I see in chat by Brisk is that he says it destroys the point of the mechanic, as in like if they were to force asset safety. It was to incentivize getting rid of these structures by providing a reason to blow them up. I completely call bullshit on that. Like, I've been through the era of EVE Online where people destroy SVUs and TCUs and shit like that and POSes just for the sake of a kill mail, right? You're talking about like each of these structures is worth like 600 billion or 600 million up in terms of like on your kill mail. I don't know if you've dealt with people in high sec that much, but they will activate a 50 million ISK kill rate on a 5 million ISK frigate just so they could have that 5 million ISK frigate on their kill board. Like, people don't need a massive incentive to blow these things up. Sure, this incentive of, hey, you might become a trillionaire overnight has gotten a lot of people more interested in it. And we're talking about these structures dying in weeks instead of months. But these structures would absolutely die without an incentive of any other sort. And you could also have just made it like an abandoned structure can be shot by anyone, and you just become a suspect, similar to like a mobile depot or an MTU or something in HiSec. Like, if that was your goal, you could have just done that, because the salvage from one of these things is about 80 million ISK on average, right? Sometimes it peaks to 140, but 80 million ISK of salvage to shoot something for 20 minutes. And we're talking 24 minutes with 2 Leshaks. So it's not like you're devoting a fleet to get rid of these and you need an incentive.
And let's be real here. We know in our guts there are more 1 billion ISK, 1 trillion ISK loot pinata structures still out there.
There must be.
There must be.
And someone mentions, I personally agree. I want more incentives to fight. I want more. This isn't an incentive to fight. This is an incentive to grind, right? There's no fighting happening here.
A lot of these comments we've seen many times. I think there's a lot of tropes out there about PvP and fighting and conflict drivers and blah, 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 blah. We've heard it 1,000 times about conflict drivers and this sort of thing, or content drivers, not conflict drivers, content drivers. Content is not just blowing things up. I mean, that's something we can explore at a different time. I won't go into that rabbit hole and stuff, but EVE Online has to be a bigger game with more room for more types of players than just let me blow something up and get a kill mail. Like, that's got to change.
Yeah.
Bjorn B.
Bjorn.
Hey, guys.
We transition to news.
Go to the news segment.
And the reason why, and the reason why Carneros is praising Bjorn B is because he just raided us. So that's
and it's awesome. It's not an ordinary raid. That's like 500 people. Well, there they go.
It's ridiculous.
Those guys are not our fans because none of them stuck around. Thanks anyway for trying.
They want to see Raravos. They want to see that purple sun. They want to see some more Triglavian.
They want to see some in-game action.
I'm in Raravos right now. I can literally show Raravos right now.
The purple sun is so gnarly, dude. It's getting gnarlier by the day.
Hey, B.
Show us the sun for a moment. Let us see that on stream. I haven't been back there since it went to full liminality or whatever it's called.
It might. It's going to break a few kind of. I'll do so for sure.
All right. Well, don't break.
We'll just. It's all right. It's all right. Like, we can carry on to news and all that, so it's all fine.
Oh, I'm wrong. They did stick around. I can't tell. It's going from like 200 to 600 to 400 to like this driving me crazy. I can't tell. I'm not going to play to the audience. Goodbye.
Just don't look at stuff. Don't look at that stuff. It's like playing poker. You don't count your chips. The CSM 15 voting did it end at downtime today, or it's still going on one more day? I think it ends tomorrow at downtime.
I thought today was the final day of voting, but it's okay. I already voted the first day. For those that haven't voted, you definitely should vote
today. Just in case we don't, because it's a global game, so the time zone is UTC, which we don't know if what your time zone is in comparison to that deadline. So vote right away, because probably within the next 36 hours, voting is done for this CSM.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of great candidates. And I will say, I've been on the CSM before. I think it's a hugely good body. And I do think a lot of the good things we've been seeing in the last year or so have been at the hands of the last 2 or 3 CSMs. I think they've done a fantastic job providing valuable feedback and just resources to CCP. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the game is going in what many would deem a better direction. And the fact that the last 3 CSMs, current CSM included, have worked very, very hard to do that. So a hugely important body. I know a lot of people poo-poo on them as useless, but they absolutely aren't. You should definitely vote. Either vote for your alliance ticket or vote for whoever you like. It doesn't really matter. Just vote for someone that you think is a good candidate.
Who wants to admit their top 2 picks?
Thank
Besides
you to
me.
Daddy D in chat for clarifying it. It is open and still until the next downtime. So if you're listening to the podcast later, it's probably too late. But
Yeah, sorry.
let's not go into who might win. But let's.
It's not who might win.
We
know who will win. Like, we got the top 8 positions. Like, we know who that's going to be. But who'd you vote for if you guys want to endorse? Because I want to know who Carneros is voting for. I'm super curious. Yeah, I want to out your votes. Who are your top 2 picks?
My votes are very, very easy to tell. I firmly believe in the Imperium ticket. Firmly. And I voted with all of my accounts personally.
Are you lying right now?
Just kidding.
Blink your eyes. Blink your eyes.
No. I believe our team's been in our CSM, I think, have been doing a great job each term. I'm not sure about Omeka, just kidding. But the rest of them, I think, have been doing a great job.
Okay.
Now, the ones that quit halfway through and don't show up for the meetings, I shake my head at those, or people who can't finish their term. But no, absolutely. Those guys have been working hard. Now, when do we get to hear the results, though?
More like drinking hard, right? Isn't that what they say?
No,
like
that
all the business is done after.
You can drink adult beverages and work hard at the same time. Contrary to some people's.
It's a good thing I'm not on CSM, because after the meeting, I would go out with the guys. They'd all be drinking, and I would have like a strawberry, or what do you call it, a grenadine spritzer or something. And everything I said at that point would be completely discounted from being valuable.
You'd have to explain that to an Icelandic bartender, but yes.
At least I wonder who you're voting for.
A grenadine spritzer sounds like a really nice way of saying, or a more manly way of saying, a Shirley Temple.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I don't want to say Shirley Temple.
I mean, so I'm of like a few minds when it comes to the CSM voting. I do know that a lot of the block votes, I'm like very impressed with the work they do, right? And I'm never like, oh man, this block put a shitty candidate out. I hate this. But I also know that the block votes don't need my vote, right? So I voted for a few. I kind of mixed it up. I didn't put the same ballot on every account. Yeah. I'm sure that is going to annoy someone to like no end. But I voted for a few people. Kenneth Feld was like my number 1 for almost all of my ballots. He's in my corp. I've known him a long time. He's super good dude. He understands EVE Online in a way that, or he understands like certain aspects of EVE Online that I think have been underrepresented and missed. He does industry stuff, which I think is very easy to forget about. He's been on CCP focus groups. He knows, and this is important. It's not necessarily the knowledge you have, it's your ability to communicate in an effective way. And that's going to annoy some other people, because it should, in a perfect world, it's like the most knowledgeable person should be there, right? But it's not that. You have to be able to communicate like your point of view across in a meaningful way that someone will listen. You can't just sit there and go, this is my pipe of fittings, this is broken.
Yeah, and I know a bunch of
story. One time, he on a fairly whim, he jumped on a plane and flew across the country to San Diego, California for one of our monthly EVE player meetups. So I've met him in real life, and we hung out, and he's great. He's very smart. I talked to him. He knows his stuff pretty well. Talking to him is a little bit like talking to Aerith. And I mean positively on both sides.
He came out to meet me, by the way. I don't know if that was really, I've never seen this before, but Carnero said, "Hey, are you going to come down to San Diego for our Alliance tournament party?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I went down there, and in walks this guy, Kenneth Feld. And he's like, I came here to meet you. I just flew in from the East Coast. I was like, what? That's crazy. Who does that? It turns out he does that. And he's like an amazing guy in many respects. Not just that kind of like, but what Elise says, this Kenneth, who's on my list, top of my list, is somebody who can communicate on the fly without having to like go back and research at all. This guy is so smart, it hurts to talk to him sometimes because he just lays out like a clean line of logic really quickly.
Yeah,
And I
he's
think
very
that is pretty
knowledgeable.
good.
And
That
other
takes
people that I voted for, and this is, I don't want to play favorites or anything, but I voted for Torvald on one of my, like, he was like number 2 on some of my ballots, even though he's like completely disagreeing with me on this this Forsaken Fortress stuff. Like, he thinks this is great. He thinks everyone that's gone should have all their shit taken away anyways. And so we're in a complete disagreement, but I won't take, like, if I had the chance to take back my votes, I wouldn't. I think he's great, and I think he's got a lot of energy, and he can communicate for a group of players that is not really communicated about much. Like, a lot of the group people in his like Abyssal Discord, they're like high sec players or PvEers, and he also likes competitive Eve stuff. I also voted for Kane Strickland because I think he would be fantastic.
Who?
Kane Strickland. He almost won last time.
No, Stitch.
Oh, Stitch Caneland.
Stitch
Sorry,
Cane.
I don't know.
Cane Stitch Caneland.
You get people to vote for the wrong guy.
Yeah. I voted for Insidious Sainthood and Phantomite as well.
Insidious Sainthood, yeah.
Those are some of the ones at the top of my list. I think they'd be really
I
good.
like your
Obviously.
list, actually.
So if you want to know, in no particular order whatsoever,
Just the top 2.
just the top 2. Well, it's kind of awkward. Top 2.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I mean, you know, Briscoe's there and
thank
Anonymous
you.
there, so
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe Bain, for the for your guys coming over. Go ahead. Sorry, McLeod.
Oh well, I mean, you're saying top 2, so like, I mean, you know that Briscoe's there and Anonymous there, so that doesn't really say much about like my list.
Yeah, I mean, this like tells me nothing.
To say like in no particular order, because then
it tells me nothing about you. That's what
exactly.
I'm looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, except that you'll just take whatever people tell you to do.
That like I had Darius on mine, I had Icarus on mine, I had Mike Azariah on mine, I had Torvald on mine as well, and
Doesn't
Phantom.
matter if they're past 2 or 3.
I did not take what people gave me.
No, you're an exception. You're not
ballot that I firmly believed in.
McLeod is bad. You're good, and the reason is,
hey,
you're a CEO, and it's different, right? Like that's like, you know, you have a job to do. That's like, I'm just kidding, McLeod. Of course, love you. Oh,
it's highly likely that my trickle down will go past 2. So
you still around?
I'm still here. I was going to say, my top 2 was none of yours. I have Torvald my second, but my number 1's PJ Hustle from Innit Associates.
Yeah, good guy. He's a good guy. I like him.
Yeah, because I think he could represent something that isn't really done, which is people who live in nullsec but don't have the intent of PvP.
You have the support of a big
there.
PJ's a great dude. The only reason why he wasn't on my list is because the stress and the terrible, you know, being a CSM to basically to kill him essentially.
I want to say it's about,
a little bit dark. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about seven people, I think, from TIS, because we pick up great people who ran for the CSM, and so it's hard to like. We as TIS don't have any kind of ballot. We always flirt with it. I always flirt with it, but it's always going to be from my opinion and stuff. But I would never put out a ballot for TIS. I think that Elise didn't agree with, that Carneros didn't agree with, that a lot of us didn't agree with. Like, then that would be the only way to do it. Make it a vote, like a primary. That would be the only way to put out a TIS official ballot. But I like Elise's style. I understand Carneros' style. McLeod, I just don't get. I'm just
well, that's because
I'm just picking on
you don't have context.
I love you. I'm just picking on you. But I like that that thinking through and the breaking up different accounts for different votes to kind of like feel like you've covered the priorities that are not usually covered. And that's kind of how I would vote as well. And I think you and I have Kenneth Feld in common as far as like the guy's just too smart not to have on there.
I feel like we've talked about CSM for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Let's go on to some new stuff. Edencom. Edencom is a new faction. If you haven't been playing really recently, it is allied with Concord and the four great empires of Empire Space. We'll call it that. It's the Joint Command, and they have 3 new ships and a new weapon system that they're showing off on the Singularity test server right now. And people have been, is it safe to say, drooling over them? They have fun names.
As soon as we saw the trailer with that one ship that we didn't know what it was, and it had this like little blue zappy thing on it, it looked like a shaman. I think everyone just immediately fell in love, and they're like, "It's Zappy Boy," and that's been like the hype thing for, I'd say, the last 8 weeks. Is like, when is Zappy Boy coming? Because we know he's coming.
Maestro McLeod, can you put graphics up on the screen for our viewers?
You want to see Zappy Boy?
Any of them. But let's just go over for a moment what there is up there, and tell you about these. I typed all their names into the chat somewhere. Are they gone now?
Well, there's Skybreak. You know them, right, Elise?
Skybreaker is the frigate, Stormbringer is the cruiser, and Thunderchild is the battleship, and they all run with the little arc weapon.
The Arcane Vorton projector.
By the way, Stormbringer, best name ever. I think of Elric's sword in D&D, right? Like
yes.
That black sword is like...
Yes. Fantastic name. A little bit strange that the Skybreaker is the frigate, the Stormbringer is the cruiser, and the Thunderchild is the battle cruiser. But, all good, fantastic. I think the Thunderchild is absolutely gorgeous. A little bit insectoid, a little bit dark, just a beautiful ship. Anyway.
A lot of antennas, a lot of like conductive parts. And look at the animation. I think the animation for these ships is amazing. It's getting so much more complex than it used to be. It's not just the flat moving in and out. It's like a complete different animation. It has 3 or 4 different moving parts for each part. The insectoid antennas come out that are actually the guns, the conducting the electricity. It's just it's a well conceptualized ship, both for the game and its space for where it fits in, but also just graphically, it makes a lot of sense to what it does. The graphics do.
So
sorry, I'm ambiguous on this, like Bjorn B is, but I guess we'll get into opinions in a second.
A couple, just for more context for you guys, these are a little bit like the Triglavian ships in the sense that you've got one massive weapon that you install and it does the thing for you. But I actually, in some ways, is complete opposite of that. The Triglavian weapon system reaches out, zaps, and starts shooting one thing for a long period of time and ramps up more and more dangerous and more powerful over time. This does not do that. This reaches out to the target you pick and then shoots up to 5 targets within 10 kilometers of what you shot at. And they all get equal damage. It doesn't shrink as each additional target chains. No, it's all one target. It's all gets full value. And it doesn't particularly differentiate friend from foe very well, unless you're in high sec and you have your safeties turned on. Did I say that right, guys?
I believe so, and I know talking in stations yesterday we had Fonsui on, and you guys broke it down really, really well as to the performance, what you can expect to see from it. It's maybe some changes that'll come because these aren't final. Obviously, they're going to make some tweaks here and there. I suspect that they're going to be a little bit too strong when they enter the game. Like CCB does have this tendency of having these new ships be like over buffed and then just like nerf them slightly. So I'm hyped to get in on these.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about this, definitely check out yesterday's video, June 6th, Eve Online, on our YouTube. But also, Francois here, and he's in public chat, so you can pop in and talk to him. He's done a lot of testing with these things, and he broke it down for us so that other people could learn from him. But you can talk to him directly. He's very open, very friendly. He's in TIS public chat all the time.
Yeah, there's more to learn. So come in and talk to him. He'll explain to you how the ammo works, what the damage types are, close range, long range. It's fantastic. Very worth knowing in advance. And how we're going to be getting skill books soon seeded and all that. You want to know that stuff. So you're invited to get on Discord.
The only observation I would like to put out again is how this matches the Triglavian set of ships. Triglavian sets of ships want to attack one person for an extended amount of time. The longer you can hold target and apply damage, the stronger your damage will get. So it ramps up. And this is the opposite. This is you want a ball of enemies, and the more enemies there are, the more the lightning conducts. So if you shoot 2 targets, that's going to do less damage than if you shoot 4 to each of them. So it's a really interesting design, and it's very much the opposite of Triglavians, which I kind of liked.
And it's going to be challenging for Logi because people are not going to know they're being targeted. They're not going to be able to see everyone lock their ship and then broadcast for reps saying, I'm going to be primaried next. They can take a lot of damage without ever being locked by any of the hostile ships. So Logi they're going to need to wait and react till after they've taken damage to then request stuff. So Logi have to move quicker on more targets at the same time. It's going to be really interesting. A lot of fun.
And then we had another neat little development in the invasion thing, and I might need a little bit of help here. So we know Raravos was the first system that the Triglavians won. Like the players supporting the Triglavians succeeded on. It went to escalating liminality, then final liminality, and it drops from 0.6 to effectively nullsec, but it's like nullsec with an asterisk because you can't sign away and you can't have bubbles, you can't do bombs. It's just essentially high sec with no concord. So that happened, and it was in a new it was in a blue sun system. And then I think yesterday in the system of Veil, the Triglavians won another system, Veil. They got it to final liminality, and it dropped from 0.7 to that same like nullsec light type thing. But that was in a system with a yellow sun, so it wasn't necessarily just a blue sun system like we kind of thought the whole time. Maybe there's like other wrinkles to it. Am I wrong with this? I don't know.
Did the sun turn purple too?
No,
not yet, but I think it will. It's got the little zappy thing in it. So
well, what's assumed is that the blue suns are the ones that can be changed, but any system can be attacked. Yellow being something that's more likely to be attacked based on the work that ARC did in researching the patterns of the NPCs and what they were attacking over the last year of the invasions.
I remember the first day of the invasion, the pro trig forces went like all in super hard on this one system, and it kind of just reset. Like nothing happened. And the players were like, oh, what happened? Was this because it was a yellow sun, not a blue sun, or the trig's not interested? CSB were like, nope, it's working as intended. It's not broken. So a lot of the pro trig forces just focused only on these blue sun systems because they know that the Triglavians have some sort of proclivity for blue suns. But now Veil, it was a yellow sun system, so who knows what's going to come next?
Yeah. We also don't know the permanence of the security situation. And that's going to be something interesting to find out over time.
Yeah. I'm dying to see what they do next. This is very interesting. So it's a great time to be playing Eve, unless you like resources. But other than that, it's a great time to be playing Eve.
I will say I'm still super psyched for Niarja when that happens. If it happens, I am going to go all in on this whole thing. And I know like a bunch of people I think it's easy if you play EVE Online, or if you're like really into the community. It's easy to say, "Oh, the Triglavians are overwhelmingly everywhere. Like everyone wants to help the Triglavians." Totally not true. If you look at the actual thing, it's like a little bit easier for Edencom to win, and like the Trigs are the bad guys, like initially, so it's very easy to just start shooting them for straight off. The Edencom fortress systems, I think there's like a dozen. No, there's 14 that have been like all already secured in Edencom, and there's only 2 that have been secured for the Trigs. So a lot of a lot of like Trig minority stuff there, but it's super cool to see what happens.
Well, thank you all very much for another episode. I do want to point out that in less than an hour, we have a new show. No, it's longer than that. It's like 3 hours. Shoot, I got the time wrong. 3 hours from now, roughly, on YouTube, Who's a Fish is going to be debuting a new Talking in Stations show format. And I'll tell you about that in a second.
She normally does Eve Echoes stuff, but this is going to be a different show about Eve Online.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is actually about the Eve community this time. So hopefully you get a kick out of it. So again, thank you for joining us today for another conversation about spaceships. You're also welcome to enjoy our Today in Eve Online daily show at 1500 UTC, hosted by Matterall, Monday through Friday. Great stuff. The one on Friday, I think, was the one that had all the great Edencom ship information with Fonsui, and you should go back and check out that one.
Saturday, May 6th, actually.
Oh, it's Saturday. Okay, it was just yesterday's. All right. Thank you. Please watch more of our videos on youtube.com/talkinginstations, all one word. We have reorganized them into chapters to help you locate the subjects you're interested in. Some thank you to the volunteers working hard on that stuff. But yeah, join our host, Who's a Fish, tonight, again at 2100 UTC, 9 p.m. I just got an asset safety notification. Very fun. Thank you. Yeah, join Who's a
Quite on
Fish
topic.
tonight, 2100 UTC. She's debuting a new show related to the Eve community on youtube.com, not Twitch TV. Okay. And again, please join our conversation on the Talking in Stations Discord, where you can get a lot of very valuable information. There should be a link somewhere here nearby or on talkinginstations.com. And again, big thanks to our supporters on Patreon, YouTube, and Twitch TV who make this all happen. That's all for this episode. Fly well.
Thanks for the raids. B, Joe, thank you.